welcome back to MFA Writers. I'm Jared McCormick, and I'm thrilled to have you here. Before we get to our wonderful conversation today with Emma Allman, I wanted to talk a bit about how you could become a guest on the podcast. The application is pretty simple and can be found on our website. Just go to mfawriters.com, scroll down a little bit, and click the Apply button. As you all know, the majority of our guests are current MFA students or recent graduates. For current students, we usually host those in their second or third year, since they can more easily speak to the intricacies of their program. We also accept applications from creative writing PhD students, creative writing faculty members, and established writers or editors who can provide helpful information as it relates to being an emerging writer. So if that describes you or someone you know, I hope you'll consider applying. You can find MFA Writers on Instagram and Twitter, as well as mfawriters.com. We love to hear from listeners, so feel free to shoot us a direct message on one of those platforms, or an email at mfawriterspodcast@gmail.com. And if you have a minute to rate or review the show, the best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts. Doing so will help boost our podcast as we try to boost these amazing writers. Also, once again, if you or someone you know would like to be a guest on the show, you can apply at mfawriters.com. On that same website, you can also click the support button to support us financially, if it's within your means. Or you can do so by going directly to buymeacoffee.com/mfawriters. Finally, as always, thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to MFA Writers, the podcast where we talk to creative writing MFA students about their program, their process, and a piece they're working on. I'm your host, Jared McCormick. Today I'm with Emma Allman. Emma studied creative writing at UW-Madison and is entering her third year in the MFA program at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Prior to returning to grad school, she worked in market research for several years in Chicago. She's had pieces published with Ellipsis and Ink and Thirds, shortlisted with Smokelong, and she's had a play produced for the Marcia Legere Student Play Festival at UW-Madison. She has pieces forthcoming with Landlocked and Ink and Thirds. Today she's brought a piece of short fiction to read for us.
All right, wonderful. This is called You'll Find in Me a Forest. 1. If I love you. I'll take you to the cabin. I'll start a fire in the meadow, and when the smoke blows your way and tears stream down your face, I'll say, close your eyes. Say over and over, I hate white rabbits, I hate white rabbits, I hate white rabbits. Shrouded in smoke, you'll reach for my hand while I stoke the fire. We both know, eventually, the wind will change. We'll wait. 2. If I love you. On a sleepy Sunday afternoon when my bees are sun-soaked and lazy, you'll discover my honey-dripped heart in a hive. I'll pulse in your hand. You'll look at my vast blue sky and wonder how I could leave myself here so easy to find. A bee will fly away, followed by another, until it's just you and my now fermented heart. Together, near a now empty hive, we'll drink honey wine. 3. If I love you. I'll teach you to be wary of wild animals and poison ivy. You'll come face to face with critters you always thought were small, but when they bare their teeth at you, you'll stumble back and wonder how you taste. I will not comfort you away from this fear. Here, it's the ache that keeps us alive. 4. If I love you. I'll swim with you in the mouth of the Brule, and we'll soak in the hot tub water of the river. I'll race you across the ever-shrinking strip of burning sand in Lake Superior. The water will shock us into each other, and I'll apologize. I'll say, I should have warned you it was going to be cold. I should have told you this water has depths that reach up from below. We'll shiver until the lake spits us back into the mouth. Rocks like teeth will grab at our feet. Round and round we'll go. 5. If I love you. I'll show you a night so dark it blurs the lines of our bodies. Our unseen edges will float up together into the cloudy sky, and just before we melt into the night, light will shine through. I'll grab your hand and thank the moon for lighting our way back into ourselves. Sometimes we'll wish we'd stayed in the dark to become each other, to become the night, to fill the expanse of all that there is and drop the weight of difference between me and you and everything. 6. If I love you. After everything, you'll leave. You'll smell your clothes, and the campfire smoke won't remind you of that moment when it stung. Instead, you'll smell the crackles of light in the dark. You'll remember how we spilled ourselves into the flames, and despite our fears, the fire kept ablaze. Self-conscious now, wary of the sharp edges of my wild temptations, you'll wash the scent away. Honey will be too sweet, and the ache will be a distant memory. You'll start cutting down the trees. 7. If I love you. I'll linger too long in the soot and ash of the campfire pit, hoping the fleeting moments of us will pause, will grow. The river runs, but the shores are a bog. They sponge up the spring melt and the memories I'm grasping, I'm clawing to keep. Flashes of skin and laughter, untamed joy, bees and the promises made with wild abandon trap me here. Rain shines the forest and wipes clean the doubts and fears that come with being seen. The campfire pit may drown, but it will not wash away. So here, a part of me, for you, will wait. 8. If I love you. Please, leave only footprints, take only all of me.
Emma, that was beautiful. Thanks so much for sharing it with us and for being here.
Thank you for having me and listening.
The first thing readers may notice when reading your work is its deep connection to the natural world. I'm curious to hear where your interest in nature comes from. Did you grow up spending a lot of time outdoors?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly it. I did. And honestly, as I've gotten older and older, I think I kind of took it for granted as a kid how much exposure I really got. One of the joys of meeting people as an adult has been one, understanding that not everybody just grew up camping and backpacking and canoeing and exploring the natural world, and then being able to show people. And I'm incredibly privileged in that my parents live in far north Wisconsin, right near-ish Lake Superior. And have 40 acres of land. And it's right near the Brule River, which if you know, it's quite famous. If you're in the fly fishing world, you're jealous of me right now. Yeah. And it's just so much a part of how I move through the world and what I prioritize, that it was always going to show up in my writing somehow. And I think recently, especially, it's been more integrated in a quite intentional way, which has been fun.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up in rural Missouri, and my family had 30 acres of land out in the woods. And, so I grew up running around in the creeks and the woods
it's
and all
so
that.
Special.
It is special, but you don't realize it in the moment, right? You don't realize how special it is and how much it kind of seeps into who you become as an adult.
Yes. And what you learn. There are things that I hope I've gotten better about this, that I'll walk somewhere with a friend and be like, oh, well, obviously we don't touch that plant. Don't do, everyone know, oh, you didn't know that. Okay. Yeah. Don't touch that plant. It's just, as a kid, especially, I think you learn through experience, and it's really important. Yeah.
And I feel like I realize how important it is to me the most when I return to that place, that specific plot of land where I grew up, and suddenly I don't know, you feel it in your bones. Is it the same for you? Because you've been living away from Wisconsin for a while. What's it like when you go back there?
Yeah, it's home. It is. It really is. I kind of grew up in between middle of Wisconsin and far north Wisconsin. And then once I started undergrad, my parents officially built out what used to be a one-room log cabin into a more livable year-round house with running water and all that jazz. And I've never missed the house that I grew up in. I think the cabin in East Fork and the woods and area surrounding it, if I were to not have access to that anymore, it would really be like a piece of my heart. But yeah, it's my favorite place. It always will be. I know people like to brag about the mountains and oceans, but you can't quite beat the Northwoods in my mind. And, as far as writing, my kind of like quippy thing to say is if you see a tree or a forest in any of my writing, it is a specific tree at East Fork or the forest at East Fork, like that, unless I am very intentionally trying to place a piece of writing elsewhere, which I don't know that I've necessarily spent enough time in other places yet to really feel that draw to write there. But right now it's the visual that I have is always something specific to that area and that region.
So as far as your writing process, like when you sit down to write that piece, you're actually trying to visualize a specific thing from that forest that you grew up in. That helps you like produce the story or helps you draft a story?
Yeah. I think a lot of what my short stories especially work in are the internal. Like the piece I have coming out with Landlocked is exploring like desires and like a quite complex relationship using body horror. And so now as I've moved sort of into, okay, I still want to explore the internal human experience. And I like the affectiveness of genre writing. The project for me has been tying what is happening with us to the external world, to both explore like the internal things that are happening and also like highlight the fact that those things aren't happening ever in isolation. And I think a lot of my stories, before I started having this more nature-focused, these more nature-focused ideas, a lot of those stories were pretty in a vacuum of like just exploring the internal and like finding ways to tease that out. And I really love the reader experience of like oh, it's so gross, I'm getting goosebumps, or like having just like a gut punch of a moment. I know sometimes they can be cheap, but I love them so much. And I think the idea of expanding that out into the natural world is really, really exciting to me. So I think I do still start with the internal. Like when I have a story idea, it will be writing down some sort of emotionally driven journey. And then the project is tuning up or tuning down as needed, the environmental factors and letting that internal journey be more and more and more and more informed by what's happening outside of the character and letting like the cliche of someone's sad, so there's a thunderstorm, right? Like, I think it's so much more fascinating if someone's sad and they're in a bright, beautiful, happy forest. Like that clash is really because it's going against our expectations. And like, this is nothing new. Everyone knows it sucks to be sad on a sunny day. That's why LA is like a little odd to be in. But it's something that I don't think we play with enough because it's a little uncanny. It's a little surreal. It's just outside of, it's decentering us, right? Like it's like post-humanist writing where we understand the natural world not as something that we are overpowering, but something that we are in connection with and tied to, regardless of how we treat it. So might as well, and it will outlast us. Like my favorite apocalypse stories are ones that are like, yeah, humanity's done. The world is fine, actually. It'll keep going. It might be changed. It will be changed forever because of us. But yeah, that's really what I'm interested in exploring now, and not setting aside the internal journey of us. I think that's vital to my stories, for sure. But making explicit ties to our actions and behaviors are changing our environment, and our environment is changing our actions and behaviors and feelings.
Yeah, you told me before the interview that that connection between the internal and external is a thing that you see in a lot of other genres like sci-fi or even fantasy, but you don't see so much in ecofiction, and that's something that you want to change. So what is it about ecofiction that you think lends itself to this kind of exploration?
Yeah, so I have become a little obsessed. I'm sure people around me here are sick of me talking about about the uncanny and the surreal, and I have tried to start learning more, especially in the artistic world. There's an artist I really love, a photographer named Brooke DiDonato, who it's all like posed pictures, but set up in a way that is just absolutely 100% uncanny without really like the digital alterations that I think we've come to associate, like AI is uncanny, right? But it's part of our world. Like the uncanny can be found everywhere. And I think it jolts us out of our routine in a way that's really healthy. Like I think we cannot be expected to consciously make every single choice we have to make every single day, right? Like that would be insane. We would all go crazy. And also, if every once in a while we see something that is fundamentally real, fundamentally in front of us, and our brains can't process it because it's different from what we would expect and what we're used to seeing. My favorite example is so in addition to being very outdoorsy, my parents and my family did a lot of road trips when we were quite young, which was core memories, right? And one of the things we would do is we would be in a brand new place in the mountains or in the desert or just in a different region than northern Wisconsin. And we'd be like, well, I think I could live here. Like, I think I could live here. And my mom would be like, yeah, me too. And my brother would be like, yeah, I could live here. And he'd be like, all right, Dad, what do you think? And he'd kind of look around. He's like, well, it's nice, but like the trees are all wrong. Like, no, like I could, none of, and like, I like, he was kind of being silly, but I think that's so like accurate. Like we don't know until we get outside of our like comfort zone, the environment that we're familiar with. We don't know what we've become accustomed to. So you take all of my knowledge. I could live in the middle of the woods in northern Wisconsin for quite some time and be fine. Probably not comfortable, but I could be fine. I don't think that skill set would transfer to the woods here in Alabama. There's these crazy Oompa Loompa trees that are fascinating, but I know nothing about them. And it is uncanny to be walking around in a forest here, which is a place that I do feel quite at home and quite comfortable. And also know that like most of my knowledge about the outdoors is not super relevant. So I think finding moments of uncanniness that are rooted in reality rather than trying to construct something AI-like that is uncanny because it hasn't been created in our own brains and hearts and in the world, right? I think that has been kind of the project for me because it blips us out of our kind of standard mode of operating just long enough to just reconsider our relationship with whatever emotion I happen to be writing into and or whatever environment I'm trying to write into. So that has sort of been the focus for me recently. And I'm like, hopefully this year sometime, I'm going to set up an independent study for myself to start reading in surrealist writing because I know that that's a genre that exists. I know like everything I say, I know for a fact. It's not like a brand new idea. I am aware it's brand new to me. And I'm excited to sort of like go into the lineage of that type of writing and how it's been used. And I'm familiar with a little bit of Kafka, of course, but like I want more non-human centered uncanny, surreal writing that still keeps us in the equation, but just sort of reconfigures the relationship.
Yeah, I think that idea of using defamiliarization in your writing is really interesting in relation to nature, a thing that on its face seems like something we're all used to. We know what nature looks like, right? So to try to defamiliarize that is really interesting. I'm curious to know how that plays into your process when you're writing something, like when you're actually sitting down and drafting something. how do you try to create that feeling of defamiliarization? And how do you know when it's working?
Ooh, yeah. So process-wise, very focused on the internal to start. And imagery. So I think most of my short stories come from like a moment like a scene of just like the one that I'm working on right now that is like kind of one of my first attempts at like really going all in on like, this is not just an internal journey. This is me pulling the external world into it. The premise is odd, right? So the scene that I had in mind was a woman on the shore of Lake Superior picking up a rock and like finding a really deep connection with this rock. And you do that and it's like, it's love. And it's like, we only see her perspective for quite some time. And like starting to like, that is like an odd moment, right? That like, I just kind of need the reader's trust of like, this is just what it is. We are getting her internal, and her internal is saying that this rock is perfect. This rock is connecting with me. This rock is listening to me. This rock, the weight of it on my stomach when I lay down in the sand is untwisting all of the things that I thought were wrong with me and bad and awful, right? just this moment. You have to go with it. You have to be in it. And I think that it have to be in it stuff is like tying to familiar emotions, tying to, we've all had crushes. We've all been in love. We all understand what it feels like to have like the twisties in our stomach of like regret or something went wrong and I'm trying to start over. So digging into that with this sort of big, surreal, odd thing of like, okay, but this is a person who's like in love with a rock. Like that is at the face of it odd. The project then became like, okay, so like, what's the journey? Where are we ending? What's going to be the arc? And once I had that sort of sketched out, I could go in and use the environment, like tune up and tune down is another phrase I'm sure my colleagues are sick of me saying because it's like I think there are so many elements of story where it's not that no, this shouldn't exist or yes, it should exist. It's like it needs to exist, but it needs to be just slightly tuned up. It needs to appear in 3 more sentences in a paragraph, or it needs to be slightly tuned down and like just like softly lead the readers into the idea that this exists. And I think for me, it's been a project of if this is the core, if the relationship between the stone and the woman is the core, and we're only getting the woman's perspective. Where is she? She is in a cabin in the forest, right? Okay, so she's in a cabin in the forest. How would that environment play a role in any normal relationship between two people? If it's just her and a rock, how might she use that rock? How might she use the trees and the river and the meadow to go through the motions of things that we would recognize as like dating? And how normal can we make that feel? And then how often can we keep the tension in the story while also having hard moments of the reader gets to go, whoa, that was crazy. That was weird. Wait a minute. This isn't normal. I got lulled into thinking this was normal. And I think the way that I tell one is I have people I trust here who I will send the story to. This is one of the slower pieces I've written, so I'm feeling like not super confident about it. But I think rhythm is really important to me. Everybody gets sick of the piece of advice of like reading out loud is really important. That's how I catch when an idea that I had isn't threaded through. So that's kind of my tester, and other eyes on it is my tester. I think there are some things, this is going to sound so cocky, but there are some things that I have written where like, I don't even think it's cocky. I think it's true. If you're bored with what you're writing, your readers are going to be bored with what you're writing. But it's also true of other emotions. Like there are moments when like I am writing something and like kind of like breaking my own heart about it, right? Like it sounds, I am putting this character in a horrible position and it's making me sad. And I trust that feeling in myself to transfer to the readers, or when it's making me feel really happy or nervous or scared or intense. I feel like we have to feel those feelings while we're writing, and then trusting that is clutch. And that's the difficult part, I think, probably.
Yeah, I mean, George Saunders talks about how he's got like a little arrow in his mind that one direction is like bad and one direction is good. And he's constantly, while he's reading his own work, paying attention to that little arrow. And as soon as it dips into the bad section, he's thinking, why? What is it? Did we lose some energy? What is it about it that's not working here? You know?
Yes, exactly.
I think part of the writing process is honing your skills and reading your own work and feeling what you feel and noticing it and understanding that the readers are going to feel that too.
Yeah. And leaning into it. The leaning into it part is hard, I think. Like I love working in body horror. It does exactly what I want it to do. And it's so tough because it's pretty gruesome and it's not usually like a happy story. It usually will take me quite some time to write, but it's so worth it to like kind of mentally prep myself and then go into, I was on the rowing team at UW-Madison, and one of the assistant coaches would tell us whenever things got really hard, she was like, okay, you have to open the door. You're going to feel some pain. You're going to see a dark room. You need to go through the dark room and you just have to keep walking. Like, you just have to trust that there's a door at the other end. And I think it's the same is true of writing. Any intense experience, you just have to walk through the dark room and trust that there's a door at the end.
Yeah. All right. Well, you love nature. You obviously love writing. You studied creative writing as an undergrad. But after college, you ended up in Chicago working in market research for several years before you came back to the MFA. So what was that experience like? How did you end up doing that? And what motivated you to return to school and return to creative writing?
Yeah, I actually kind of have to laugh at myself because I for many years was like, I will never get an MFA. That couldn't be me. But yeah, I spent some time after my lease was up in Madison, and I kind of took the long way round towards my undergraduate degree, with a couple years off in the middle. And I didn't really know where I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. I was lucky enough to have a couple of freelance gigs and just drove around the country and stopped for money every once in a while to send a few articles off. And had enough friends and community in Chicago already that is kind of where I ended up. And I had a friend at the market research company who gave me a recommendation and got me that job. It was initially in copy editing. And I think my thought was, and I still there is a version of me that is still in market research and having a grand old time and and living an artistic life. The beautiful thing about a city like Chicago is even as I was copy editing, even as I kind of worked my way up into being an analyst and was writing, it was interesting research to do. I was working in food and drink. I love food and drink. So it's cool things to know about. I didn't necessarily hate the job itself, but it wasn't creative writing. I was taking on the voice of the business I was working for. And the values of the business I was working for because I had to. But I was getting very creatively fulfilled by taking all sorts of acting and improv classes, and had a pretty strong artistic community around me of people doing all sorts of things. A lot of comedy friends. Can't throw a stone in Chicago with hitting a comedy friend. A lot of people who were looking to get into film and needed extra hands on set. And it was just a really fantastic community. I think I found myself getting really inspired by them and then kind of flailing I love comedy. I appreciate it, but I don't want to do it. That's not, I'll write a funny story every once in a while, but I don't really feel like going up on stage. I didn't feel passionate enough about the projects a lot of my community were doing to take the helm and do something like that myself. Even knowing that I had their support. And so I came back to my own creative writing. And I think was starting to feel frustrated that between work and doing a lot of writing for market research and staying very involved in my artistic community, I didn't have a whole lot of energy left to work on my own projects and really, really prioritize evolving as a writer. I could feel myself kind of And I learned a lot, took a lot from various arts. I believe really strongly we should all invest in other arts because they impact our writing in great ways. But if you don't then have time to actually apply those lessons to your writing, it's still not going to evolve. Just have some great ideas with nothing on the page. So that was part of it for me. I will say a huge factor is the pandemic hitting. My entire social life and artistic community suddenly had to go on pause for quite some time. And that job that was fine, but not feeling passionate about, suddenly became much harder to do because I was no longer funding a life that was exciting or something that I was proud of, or like I didn't feel like I was creating anything anymore. So that coincided. I had a lot of time to apply to MFA programs all of a sudden. So that was kind of the journey to realize that like an MFA was the place to let myself evolve as a writer and kind of up my chops, right? Like I saw all these people around me doing the thing they loved artistically and constantly upping their chops with it. And I was like, I need and want to do that too. I want to be a part of this. I want to climb the ladder a little bit.
So what would you say are some of the advantages and challenges of coming back to academia and to creative writing after that time away?
Yeah. The challenges are boring. The challenges are mostly financial, right? As much as I am thrilled to be where I am right now, I really do feel lucky and I think I am living out my expectations. I am making a lot less money than I was. And so that was a bit of an adjustment. But honestly, other than that, I think the big lie of academia is that it's different from the like quote unquote outside world. I think having time in an office setting, I was like 4 to 5.5 years. I can't quite remember. I learned a lot about professionalism and just like what I think there is a pretty big difference between the undergraduate experience and the like outside world and the graduate experience. I think as an undergraduate, you are a client and the university is sort of catering to you and serving you. As a graduate student, you are part of a company. You are part of an organization that is serving someone else. And hopefully there are services for you as well. But like, really a level of professionalism is super useful and understanding like which opportunities are available and seeing them for exactly what they are. Understanding that like if my time here is like transient, like I'm probably not going to stay in Tuscaloosa for an extended period of time after my MFA. I can have complaints about the program or people, whatever, fine. But the people who are helping me navigate it don't need to hear them. Like the staff here, the faculty here, they are going to be here long after I'm gone. And I think having a lot of respect for that, is something that I have taken from like being in a company, and understanding that like no one loves their job all the time. There's always bad parts, but you get through it by focusing on the good parts and finding ways to manage the bad bits. And I think there is a tendency of grad students to rage against the machine. I totally get it. We should make good change. We should make positive change. And also, the people who have been here before we were here and are going to be here after we are gone, they already know. like we can go do that over drinks and then find ways to help them so that they can help us. I think that's another thing, identifying who actually is able to help you and who is just doing the best they can to make their own things work is pretty important. And people are so rarely out to get you. They're not never out to get you, but they're very rarely out to get you. So if you want something or you need something, you can send an email and ask. And if they don't reply, you can send another email. And you probably should, because it's not malicious. It's just everybody's a little bit overworked in a university. And if you're willing to do the work to get yourself something, you can get it, which is pretty unique. That doesn't happen everywhere.
Yeah. And taking the time, I guess, to understand all of that bureaucracy and all those things that people are dealing with, you develop a better understanding of who can help you get the things that you want.
Yes, right? Exactly. Yes. No, I think that's so, like, I was not terribly involved my first year, which I think if this is a long enough program where I feel comfortable with that, I can understand with maybe a slightly shorter program that would be more difficult to justify. But it was a lot of kind of just asking questions and looking around and trying to figure out, like, okay, so if I want a course remission, if I don't want to teach, if it turns out I don't like it, which I actually kind of love it, so it's fine. But if it turns out I don't like it, what are my options? Who do I have to go talk to? Who can give me information? Who can I go talk to indicate an interest a year ahead of time, so there's no surprise when I finally do apply? I think these are things that, like, you do in a just office job. If you want a promotion, you set a meeting with the person who could maybe give it to you. That I don't think it always occurs to people to do within the academic world, but it's not that different from a business. Yeah. It kind of runs the same.
And if I can add one more recommendation, when coming into an MFA program, try to find that student like Emma who figures these things out.
I share knowledge freely and possibly to an annoying extent.
Hey, I was that student too. Other students in my MFA program used to joke that I was the unofficial advisor to most of the MFA program. And it was because I also had time outside of academia before returning. And when I went back, I wasn't afraid to ask questions and push for the things that I thought I should have and that my fellow students should have. And so by the time I was a third year, the students who were coming into the program knew they could ask me. I'd already figured these things out. And so, and that's a good cycle to have within an MFA program, to share that information with the people that come in, so that everyone has a sense of who to go to and how to get what we need.
I agree. We have a program-wide group chat and then I think each cohort my cohort has its own group chat as well. But, like, we do a lot of crowdsourcing. Like, you don't ever have to navigate something alone, and it's always worth asking, like, has someone else done this before? Or does anyone else have ideas about how to do this? And if you're sending a scary email, find someone you trust to read it over. Yeah. Like, it's probably not that scary. You've probably put some emotions on it that don't need to be put on it. Take a few deep breaths. It'll be fine.
All right, well, let's dig into the MFA program at the University of Alabama a bit more. The program, it seems, offers a lot of flexibility. According to the website, students can choose to focus on poetry, prose, or a mix of both. And the program can be completed in 3 years, though everyone is guaranteed funding for 4 years if they want to stretch it out. Before we get to all of that, though, I want to hear about living in Tuscaloosa. I know there might be some connotations about Alabama. Some people might have paused the idea of moving there for a program, but I'm curious to hear what your experience and reality has been like.
Yeah. I mean, it's so fascinating because I think the reputation of Alabama is deserved, right? Like, the legislation that frequently gets put into place certainly earns a reason to be worried for your safety, perhaps, if you're moving down here. A couple of things I would say is, one, no place is the cartoon version of itself. I get the same reaction about living in Alabama from people who live in the Midwest as I do when I tell people down here that I moved here from Chicago. Like, I can just see in their mind's eye, they're seeing, like, bullets whizzing by my head. And that's just not the reality of where I lived in Chicago. I felt very safe there. And I feel fairly safe here. No place is what we've built it up to be in our head. Real people actually live here, and will be living here. And some aren't privileged enough to leave if they do feel unsafe. And so communities have formed around that. In addition, I would say you can be here for the MFA program. I wouldn't recommend this, but you can be here for the MFA program and completely bubble yourself in the MFA program, which is largely transplants from other places, quite queer. There are people of color in the program. We have some international students in the program. You can find community and support there. I would strongly suggest, if you come to the South, experience some of the South. Tuscaloosa itself, it's a fairly tiny town, I will say. I think some people struggle with that a little bit, just because, if you're moving here from a larger city, there's not quite as much going on. But Birmingham is really close. So if you're itching for some city life, there's that. And Tuscaloosa has a pretty fantastic arts community that's growing very quickly. I would say, as far as like the bigotry that could be encountered, my impression, and I did, knowing that I was going to come on here, I did talk to a couple people in the program, because I am like a straight passing cis white woman. So I do understand that, like, I move through the world in a much simpler, easier way than a lot of other people. My understanding that is, if you are someone who wants to be in the MFA academic bubble, the experience here won't be terribly different than the experience in any other institution, where unfortunately academia itself tends to be a little racist, tends to be a little bigoted, tends to be a little homophobic. I think, unfortunately, I cannot promise that someone will come down here and not experience any of those things.
Right. Yeah.
I also can't promise that someone will go to Chicago and not experience those things. I think it's a little disingenuous to not have been to a place and sort of put the cartoon version of it on it. And it is something that my hackles get up just a little bit, because of how we are often received when we are at conferences, of people seeing University of Alabama on our badge, and then like the wide eyes and, oh, how is it there? And I get it, because I was that person. We have a Zoom week where students, they're all asking the same question, which is a fair question, because you should want to be safe and you should keep yourself safe. And also, you are coming here to be a part of a fairly large MFA program. I think there's 15 people in my cohort, 16 maybe, and 10 incoming this year. You will have community, you will have support. And also, the South is quite a unique culture. So there's going to be the same, academically, there's going to be the same experience, more or less, that you have other places. I think more than anything, I've run into religious people more frequently than I ever did when I was living in the Midwest. That has been something that, just in a way that I takes me by surprise, and not in necessarily an evangelizing way. It's just part of the conversation here in a way that startled me a little bit at first. But yeah, I don't know. I get a little defensive, because I think sometimes that attitude comes from an idea that everybody who is unsafe here because of legislation should just leave, and that's not possible. And there's really fantastic people working really hard to change the situation here, which is worth getting involved in. It's worth contacting those organizations. There's no activist quite like an activist in the South. They have had to deal with some things. That's my I'll get up on my high horse and talk about that all day.
Yeah. No, that all makes sense. That totally resonates with me as someone from Missouri who lives in a little blue dot right in the middle of Missouri.
Yes.
So yeah, it's always nice to just get the perspective of someone who's actually living in the place. And I really appreciate that you asked some other people to see what their experience was like. Because obviously it's going to be different for each person depending on how you present and your experience. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
I know the literary magazine associated with the University of Alabama, Black Warrior Review, has a reputation of highlighting underrepresented writers. So that's another way that the program is fighting the good fight. Have you had a chance to work at the magazine at all?
Yeah, absolutely. It's my favorite. So I have no aspirations to be an editor. So I have not run for a genre editor, but anybody is allowed to read Slush and show up to the meetings where we talk through, including like the English department on whole. We do not restrict it to creative writers, which not everybody takes us up on that. But when they do, I love it. They have an interesting read on some of the things. They bring interesting insights to our conversations about pieces. But you can get involved in a more low stakes way. I would say being a genre editor, managing editor, art director, or head editor, those are ways to get course remissions. If you find when you are here that you are actually not interested in teaching and that's not something you want to do, you can get a course remission so you won't have to teach as much. I believe, so there's Boyfriend Village is a digital magazine that is attached to BWR. And I know for that, you do also get a summer stipend if you are in charge of that. I am not positive about the stipend situation for genre editors and editors. I think there's something, but I don't want to misspeak on that. It is certainly one of the opportunities for a course remission. And it's a good time. I love the meetings. It's kind of, you can feel the room kind of relax a little bit because it's kind of a like sweet relief to be talking about work that isn't so personal to someone who is in the room with you, which isn't to say we're treating each piece with respect, but there is, I think, a more casual manner that we get to say like, hey, like this really resonated with me. And then someone else can say, wow, that exact thing is why I might not want this piece to be published. And then we get to have a conversation about it, which it's just a good time.
So it seems, according to the website, that the vast majority of funding, and this is a fully funded program, the vast majority of that funding comes from teaching, which you've mentioned a couple times. What does teaching look like at Alabama?
Yeah, it's changing a little bit. So as of this year, we are now on to a 1-2 or 2-1 schedule, whereas before we were 2-2. Our class sizes have gotten a little bit smaller. They were 19 before, and now they'll be 15. Your first year, you probably won't teach. There are some exceptions. Some people get put on as an RA to a literature professor. I think that depends upon the type of experience you have coming in. You are very likely to be working as a tutor in the writing center for about 10 hours and then another 10 hours RAing for a professor. So I was a research assistant for a professor and like built his index for a book that he was coming out with and helped with a conference and then also was a tutor. And then your second year will be your first year officially teaching English 103, which is just one of the required composition courses. And you'll have a practicum course that you take along with that, truly just like to offer support. Like your practicum is where if you're dealing with a tricky situation with a student, you could come to class and be like, I don't even know how to respond to this email. Like, what do you guys think? And you have a professor there who will also guide you through just sort of like more the like actual day-to-day of teaching stuff. And then by the end of that course, by the end of your second year, you'll also be building out a teaching philosophy that you can use in the future. And you generally, it is expected, I was told, that we would each get to teach a creative writing course as well, certainly after your second year. So that will be in your third year. If you're only doing 3, it could possibly be in your fourth year if you're doing 4 years. It's kind of up to how many students sign up for any given course. And
according to the website, the stipend is around $16,000 a year. Do you know if that's still accurate?
No, it's more than that now. It's yeah. There's a small raise. As long as I've been here, there's a small raise every year. So we're up to $17,000. I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. We're up to $17,100 a year, which I will say, I live alone in my apartment. I got a pretty hot deal. It's a 2-bedroom, full living room, full kitchen, came with a washer dryer. When I moved here, it was a crazy steal. I was paying $650 a month for it,
Wow.
even for Tuscaloosa. That's a hot deal. Now it's about $750. It raised up pretty quick. And I feel comfortable during the school year when I am receiving my stipend. I feel comfortable paying my rent, paying utilities, and having a little bit of extra for groceries and like having fun and having a life. During the summer is when it gets harder. And that's where there are a few options to get some summer stipends, which one would be getting involved with BWR and Boyfriend Village. Another is the Young Writers Camp, which I love so much. We offer a camp for kiddos between the ages of, I believe it's about 10 to 16. It's this last summer, we're kind of recovering from the pandemic still. So this last summer, it was about 25 students, I think, and quite a few. You can apply to be a teacher there, and you show up for 2 weeks. You get to be in charge of a half a days of lesson, and then you help like usher the students to lunch and make sure everybody's sorted and taken care of. And we have like offer a quiet room where they can work. It fills our hearts because especially if you spent a full year teaching freshmen who are wonderful in their own ways, but can sometimes make it very, very clear they don't want to be there. When you walk into a room of like teenagers who are just pumped about writing, it is the best time. All that said, I will say a lot of people do have another job. I also work for the grad school reviewing dissertations, which is an hourly gig, pretty flexible, which is nice. Some people will work in a coffee shop. I think the stipend is really good during the school year, and the fact that we don't get it during the summer is what does catch some people up.
We've mentioned a couple of times this optional fourth year. I'm curious to hear you talk about that. Do most of the students stay for 4 years? Do most leave after 3? What does that fourth year look like if you decide to stay?
Yeah, it really is half and half. So some people, I think, have a very clear idea of what they want to be doing post grad school. And since they know they want to start it as soon as possible, so the 3 years and they're out of here. I think some people come here and kind of don't realize, maybe we're taken by surprise at the size of Tuscaloosa, and they want to get off to a bigger city as soon as possible, which I respect. You got to be in a place where you're happy. If you do the fourth year, you can essentially take an entire year of just thesis hours. You would still have to teach. I think some people do prefer to do like 2 thesis hours and then also 1 like workshop or a class, just so that there's like still some on-campus connection there and you're not isolating yourself too much. And there is also an option where you are allowed to, if you pursue another master's while you're here, that's also covered. So people who do that will likely take the fourth year because they have a much larger class load that they're trying to finish up. I know someone recently graduated with their MFA and then also like a master's in journalism. We have a book arts program here that people get really involved in and will take those courses in double. There's someone who is, I think she's doubling in either German or translations, something like that, where God bless, that sounds like so much work. Anybody who's doing a double master, I respect them all so much. Could not be me. I am looking forward to my luxurious fourth year where I am just writing.
Well, there was one more program through the University of Alabama's MFA that caught my eye, and it's the Alabama Prison Arts and Education Project. According to the website, a select number of MFA students each year have the opportunity to earn positions teaching in Alabama's prison system. Do you know anyone who has taken advantage of that opportunity and what it's like?
Yeah, I do actually. So there's a fellowship that you would apply to. You get full course remission. There is no summer stipend, but once you're kind of connected with the prison arts program, and they'll send emails every once in a while where there will be like paid opportunities to continue working for them. My understanding from people who, it's something that I've considered strongly considered every year because I think it would be a really unique, worthwhile teaching experience. Everybody I know who has participated in it has really thrived on it and has really enjoyed it. It is just inherently going to be a different experience. Again, it's one of those situations where if you're teaching the freshman composition course and you move from that over to teaching adults, there's a different relationship that gets to develop. And from what I understand, there's quite a bit of leeway about like you sort of get to build your own course if you want. And something that they mention is, because they'll give a little presentation to us every year, is that if you want to teach writing and storytelling or something like that, you are welcome to. And also you can, if you are fluent in Spanish and took Spanish your whole life and you want to teach some people Spanish and you want to get experience teaching something outside of creative writing and or literature, they ask that we propose the course we want to teach, which is a pretty unique opportunity, I think, at this level. And if you're looking to expand possibilities for your future, I think getting a variety of teaching experiences on your resume isn't a bad idea.
Well, Emma, you've been an amazing guest with lots of insights, lots of information for our listeners to mull over. Before we go, I have one last question. What is one way in which the MFA experience has been different, for better or for worse, from your expectations when applying?
Yeah. I think I kind of already talked about it. I think I was a little surprised at how useful the skills of navigating the business world were in coming into an MFA. I think I had kind of bought into the lie that the academic world is very, very different than the outside world. And it's really not. I think in ways that are sometimes really beneficial and helpful, and in some ways that like we might work on improving together as a community, which yeah, sometimes that's really good. And sometimes it's like, gosh, I wish this were run slightly different. Usually with every individual's best intentions at heart. But yeah, I think that is the thing that I would highlight. I have to say though, the thing that I tell people that I grew up knowing and that I came up in Chicago knowing is that like my expectations of what an MFA was going to be and what it could offer me have all pretty solidly been met. I feel really satisfied and content with this like huge life choice. It was worth it. It was. So yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's been an absolute joy, and good luck as you finish up the program.
Thank you. Thanks for doing this podcast. It was really helpful when I was applying for programs. So thank you.